The film we made is very specifically not historically accurate, because the Robin Hood tale has been told over many centuries. But despite the film not being historically accurate, I wanted the archery to feel as authentic and as real and as visceral as possible. So I came across this amazing guy called Lars Andersen. So I went to Denmark to meet with Lars, and he took me to his shooting range. He got me to walk 30 or 40 meters away from him, and he started firing arrows at me at historically accurate speed. Obviously, I jumped out of the way to avoid the arrows. By the way, the arrows did have rubber caps on the end, so he wasn't trying to kill me. But he did it very intentionally, because he wanted to show me that you can actually see the arrows in the air. You can easily put a shield up, easily get out of the way. In the old days, specifically with a lot of the Arab archers, they were very adept at speed archery, and they would fire arrows incredibly fast. So the idea being, they might not get you with the first arrow, but the second arrow or third arrow that were coming so fast after that, they would get you with one of those. And so I asked Lars, is it possible to teach an actor to shoot this fast? And Lars was very confident. He said that we could. But he also said that we needed to get some experts involved, because he wanted to make sure that we were as historically accurate as possible. So we got in touch with the historian and researcher and archery expert, Bede Dwyer from New Zealand, and he helped enormously with building ideas for the film. So he and Lars both read the script, and together we worked to really dig into history and start building up some interesting ideas for the stunts and moves in the film. Bede found this amazing picture from the Ottoman Empire, and I think it was of a guy holding a plate exactly in front of his head. So we built that exact move into the movie. So we'd find this stuff in history, but then Lars would have to actually work out whether it was possible to execute these tricks. We had this other idea, where Robin would be firing arrows directly at John, and he, with his staff, would be knocking them out the way. So Lars tested it. He found out that it was possible, but that sometimes when you hit the arrows with the pole, it would break the arrows. And so we put that in the movie. At the beginning of the movie, Robin is a traditional longbowman archer, and he's depicted as being absolutely superb at it. And we see him in the Crusades at the beginning of the movie using his longbow. We got the help of the expert Nick Birmingham.
From Cressy to Agincourt, we have numerous illuminated manuscripts showing archers drawing to their ear.
In this version of the Robin Hood movie, it's very different from the other films you may have seen. A lot of the battles are in urban environments. It's much more modern, guerrilla-style warfare. The size of the longbow makes it a very unwieldy weapon, not best suited for those kind of environments, which is why John, played by Jamie Foxx, trains Robin to use the Saracen bow, which is a much smaller, much faster weapon, much better suited for the kind of urban warfare that's shown in the movie.
We started out having a long discussion about how should an English longbowman adapt to Asian kind of archery. And an English longbowman will use another bow and he will draw with 3 fingers. But in big part of Asian, they use a thumb and use a thumb ring to draw. But we think that was too far for what an English longbowman would do. So instead, we will use the sandite rail where you lay the index finger over the arrows. And this was used by the old Egyptian and the Assyrian and probably the Persian and other places it was used to. And this is closer to English archery because you use the finger underneath to draw the arrow, and this is like that.
One small alteration we made was folding the little finger in, because that proved to be very hard to do. And so a practical choice with the time that we had and the amount of training that Taron had to do was to go for this grip, but not use the little finger.
So we know to hold the arrow in the draw hand, and Saracen archery said hold the arrow together between the fingers. And a similar book from the same time, Arab archery, says there's some different variation of holding the arrow in the draw hand. And number 2 is hold the arrow between your finger in the nock. And it could be like that.
We were all very committed to the actors doing as much of the archery as possible.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But this meant an enormous amount of training for them, because the film has enormous scale and enormous ambition, but we didn't want it to feel like a special effects film. So this meant that the archery in the film had to be carried out by the actors themselves.
Learning the actors' archery was difficult, and exceptional learning Taron archery, because teaching a beginner to do archery like a real historical war archer, and more like that, a historical superhero archer, is difficult. And I have to build a totally new kind of training system. I make a lot of tests and trial, but in the end it all depends on that Taron will train really hard and will be really dedicated about it.
And he spent hours and hours and hours training. Lars would give him homework. Lars would send him home with a bow and arrow and specific exercises to complete. We made this special rotating rig for him. A target would go around and around, so he'd take that home with him. His fingers were bleeding.
Bosh! That was good. That was all right. Yes.
Taron learned to shoot with both hands. And he learned to shoot with any movement, because we had some really complicated stunts in the movie. Whilst jumping forwards, and whilst jumping backwards. But most important of all was the speed.
I can fire 2 arrows a second.
We actually know how fast historical archer was, because the Saracen, the one who fight the Crusaders, have a test. And at 60 bows distance, they should shoot 1 arrow, and then they should shoot number 2 and 3 before the first one hit the target. And we know the distance, so it's been calculated, and we have made tests. At the middle of the 60 bows distance was placed a rope, and you have to shoot under the rope. And to do that, you need to use a heavy bow. Headshot. So we know it's about 1.5 seconds for the first arrow to reach, and since there's 3 arrows, it's 1.75 seconds for each of the arrow. And they actually said the test, if you're not able to do that, you should practice more. We tried to design a test to show if it eventually was actually possible for Taron to be as fast as the real historical war archer. And this is a simple test. We know this 3 hours in 1.5 seconds. And this is the simplest test. Shoot this thrown in air. It's very easy to hit number 1, but from you hit number 1, put in an arrow on and hit number 2 before it reaches the ground, you actually have less than a second. You actually only have this 0.75 second per arrow. That's actually described in Saracen archery. So if you're actually able to hit number 2 dish before it hits the ground, then you actually shoot exactly as fast as historical archers one shot.
Thanks, man.
It's been an amazing journey, an amazing 3 years. Taron has loved it. I've loved it. I've learned an enormous amount. And thanks to Lars and also the help of Bede, Dwyer, Nick Birmingham, Steve Ralphs, many other people who are involved in the whole process of the research and the training and the building of the arrows, the building of the bows. It's been a real team effort to create a kind of a style of archery that I don't think has ever been seen in a movie before.
I don't think so.
No, and it's really something spectacular and really exciting and thrilling, and the action sequences in this movie are amazing, truly amazing. So very much hope you enjoy seeing the movie that comes out in November, and thank you, Lars, and thank you to everybody else.